This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. This is Lindsay Sin, Deputy Secretary for Women Veterans Affairs at the California Department of Veterans Affairs. Happy Wednesday. Today is November 20th, 2019, and you are joining us for our bi-monthly statewide webinar series for women veterans. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm really excited to present three excellent presenters who are going to share some stories, some research, and information that I hope benefits you as a woman veteran or an advocate for women veterans. So a few housekeeping items before we start our webinar today. Please remember to mute your phones so that we can hear our speakers loud and clear. We do record this webinar and it will be available on our website within a few days from today. And you can find that at calvet.ca.gov/women veterans and then go to our statewide monthly webinar link. For a few more housekeeping items, I ask that you hold your questions for our presenters until the end of the call. We'll reserve about 10 minutes for questions and answers at the end. And then if you'd like to answer a question via our chat window through our GoToMeeting software, you're welcome to do that. And we will also get to your question to the best of our abilities through that chat window. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started and introduce our first presenter. And she is going first because after this, she's got some media interviews to do. So our first presenter today is Caroline Johnson. And Caroline is a Navy veteran, a former fighter pilot on F-18 aircraft. And she has just written a book called Jet Girl, My Life in War, Peace, and the Cockpit of the Navy's Most Lethal Aircraft, the F-18 Super Hornet. Caroline, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome. Thank you for your service. I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Awesome. Well, Lindsay and everyone out there, I really appreciate you having me on today to be able to share not only my story, but kind of my experience in transitioning and maybe some lessons I learned that can help us share our stories more effectively and really kind of bridge that gap for people. And so as Lindsay said, we'll go to the next slide. I'll give you a little bit of background on myself and kind of where I came from, how I got to what I did in the Navy, and what that really was. And so I grew up in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and in a very average family. My father was a businessman, my mom a small business owner, and I have one brother who's 18 months older than myself. We do not come from a family of service. You know, my grandparents served in World War II, but outside of that, we never had any career military or any other family members who served. And so this concept was relatively new to both my brother and myself. And he actually started by going to the United States Naval Academy. And so you'll see that in high school, this first picture, I was actually a debutante. And I thought that was pretty special to be selected as a debutante when my senior year. And from there, then I was selected to go to the United States Naval Academy. And so this picture is from day one, which is induction day on June 29th, 2005. And while the Naval Academy is a very special place, that day forward for 4 years, I was very ambivalent about how special it was. I think, as we all know, joining military service and going through basic training and those initial years of our training, it is very, very difficult. And so there's a lot of sacrifice, and 4 years were no different for me at the Naval Academy until May 22nd, 2009, when I commissioned by President Obama. And I really felt like I was at the top of my game. From there, I selected into naval aviation with 374 of my classmates, and I became an F-18 weapons systems officer. And so what this is, I sit in the back of the plane, I target all the bombs, missiles, communicate all the tactical coordination of the aircraft, and essentially, in layman's terms, to quote Top Gun, I was Goose, but I didn't die. So that kind of was the essence of my military career. From there, I went on to achieve my master's degree and returned to the Naval Academy to teach leadership and run aviation operations. And so in my career, I feel like I was very blessed to have served not only in F-18s, but aboard the USS George H.W. Bush. We flew in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. And so this entire process from being a debutante into this warfighter at the tip of the spear required a couple key things, which we're going to talk about today. And so if you go to the next slide, it talks about my preparation, which everyone in the military is familiar with. The training of both the Navy, Army, Air Force, it's unlike anything else. And I really, when I share this story with people, I break it into three major boxes. So the moral, mental, and physical preparation. And so, like we all know, that moral preparation begins day one when you start boot camp. And so at the Naval Academy, they give us 5 basic phrases we're allowed to use. Yes, sir. No, sir. Aye, sir. Sir, I'll find out, sir. And then finally, sir, no excuse, sir. And those can also be ma'am, but that is really, I feel as veterans, what sets us apart from the civilian population is that core moral fiber that runs through us, that's formed through these times of intense hardship, of sacrifice, and really that moral development. And so that when I share this story with the civilians, their eyes just light up and it kind of clicks for them what makes veterans unique. Then we go into the mental preparation, and whether it's A school or C school or whatever training the military gives you, they're so good at ingraining the key, academic points that are important to do your job. And so for me, that was an undergraduate education in economics at the Naval Academy. And then when I got to flight school, I was so excited because I was like, this is great. I'm done with college. I'm done with engineering. All right, time to get to the important stuff. No more books for me. And they handed me a stack of books that was almost as tall as myself. And I'm 5'10", so it was pretty tall. And they were like, hey, not only learn this, but memorize it because this is your life on the line. And it was like, oh my gosh, okay. So that's when things really got real for me. And then finally, physical preparation. Obviously, a very small percentage of the population qualifies for careers in the military. And a huge discriminator is actual physical qualification. And so not only did we have to be physically qualified, but the physical challenges that I faced and that we all face in the military, I don't know about all of you, but some of them seemed so insurmountable for me. I never thought it was possible to do the helicopter dunker that you see on this page, where you're preparing for your worst of worst days. So not only have I ejected out of my aircraft, ended up in the water, the helicopter comes to pick me up, they hoist you up into the helicopter, you strap in, and then the helicopter crashes. And so in this evolution, they pick you up in that shell of a helicopter, they raise you up 3 meters out of the water, and then they drop you at 9.8 meters per second, and the helicopter flips violently. From there, you have to punch out the windows, release your 5-point harness, and swim out and swim to the top of the water. It's challenges like these that people just can't even believe that we go through. But for every one of us, it became commonplace. And it became something that not only did you succeed and make it through, but those kind of built us into these people who can tackle anything, who are just ready for anything life's going to throw at you. And trust me, in the private sector, they're never going to put you in a helicopter and try and drown you, so what worse can it get? So that was kind of the preparation. And all of that took 9 years, 1 month, and 10 days from the time I started at the Naval Academy until I actually did my job in combat. And so that amount of preparation is just kind of, most people can't even fathom. So if you go to the next slide, we'll talk about the next thing that really helped make me successful in my military career, which was perseverance. Being a woman flying in F-18s when there were only 1.7% of women in the field was tough. In the military, I think the percentages of women were maybe 19% in the Navy overall now. That is a hyper minority. And to be in a minority group like that, I had never experienced it before. And so with that came challenges. I was, faced with having extreme back pain from all the traps, right? We go from 140 knots to stopped on an aircraft carrier in about 60 feet, which is not the equivalent of driving a Lamborghini into a brick wall, but it's the equivalent of driving a Porsche 911 4S into a cornfield. And so it's pretty damaging on your body. And so that was hard. Not being welcomed by some of the men in my squadron was something I had never faced. I didn't understand that just because I was a woman, I was for some reason different and I wasn't going to fit in. And so that was hard. And so it really caused me to dig deep and understand, hey, why am I serving? At the, clueless age of 18, I don't think I understood the call to service and the duty like I did until I was out there operating behind enemy lines and really sacrificing for my country. And that's when I realized it. And the way I overcame that was by reaching back to my network, which was my family and friends who really were there to support me, who were proud of the service, and who were excited to see me out there breaking barriers, and just crushing it. And so I relied on that. And then later on, I also figured out, hey, what was my purpose? What was my motivation every day to show up and to be there and do my job? And that was really, as you can see on the right, the troops on the ground. And so the men and women who were serving on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then it became my students at the Naval Academy. So ensuring the success of the next generation and ensuring that they were prepared to overcome the obstacles that they were going to face, and that they were not only ready for it, but they were excited for what the future held, and they were going to carry the torch for us moving forward. And so that kind of helped me persevere through the rough times. And that is a quality that a lot of people don't have, and that we as veterans bring to the table. We've been through adverse situations. We've, been in the field without food. We've been eating Navy food. We've been doing all this kind of stuff. And so perseverance was another key to my success. And then finally, you get to the performance, which is on the next slide. And so my job was launching off the aircraft carrier into combat at 160 miles an hour, providing armed overwatch overhead in Iraq to ensure the safety of the Special Operations Forces who were acting as technical advisors in Iraq. My job was to neutralize enemy fighters to protect innocent civilians on the ground. The Yazidis, Nadi Murad, who just won the Nobel Peace Prize, we were able to save her and some of her family members by neutralizing the ISIS fighters who were launching grenades on them up in Mount Sinjar. And that was very, I was fortunate to be able to do that. But it also was my calling, and it was unlike some of the other roles in the military, but there are women out there on submarines, there are women out there operating on the ground, there are women out there and men doing things I could never even fathom. And so we've all reached this incredible level of performance within the military and achieved the highest heights. And so I think what's key for us to keep in mind moving forward is, while you've had these past experiences, and it's important to be proud of them and to remember them and to share them with the rest of the world, it also is going to lead to great things in the private sector. And while your mission might not be to save innocent civilians on the ground, it might morph into something else. And now our job is to create impact and to find purpose moving forward, which is on the next slide. So really, what I gather from these core things that I've learned in the military, so that long-term preparation plus perseverance will get you to an elite level of performance. The way that I apply that to the private sector is trying to find purpose and to find impact. And the way I've done that and been fortunate to do it is to share my story through a book, which I know, a lot of people dream of doing, and a lot of people are like, absolutely not. I was actually on the latter group of people saying, I don't need to share my story. I didn't do anything special. Every single veteran out there has this remarkable journey that should be documented in a book. And so I was pursued by some New York writers and agents, and right place at the right time. And they, for some reason, pinpointed my story, and they're like, we want you to write a book. And I said, okay. And not what I ever dreamed I would do, but when I found the response from the private sector to be so positive, and to see little girls and boys out there just saying, wow, I didn't know this job was possible. I didn't know this was a possibility for my children. I didn't realize that there are men and women out there doing this, what it takes to get to that levels. So if we can share our stories and share them authentically and share about the ups and downs and trials and tribulations, I think it will help bridge a lot of those gaps and help ease that transition for many of us, because it is a challenging venture going in the private sector. But so today I'm out there and I found that, no longer am I launching off the aircraft carrier and flying behind enemy lines and being at the risk of getting shot down. But I found that my purpose is really the next generation, and not only educating them on the options that are out there of serving in the military or serving in a different capacity, but also empowering people to realize that it was never my dream to fly in fighter jets. I thought it was cool to be a debutante and to put on a white dress and to dress up like a princess. But then I realized that these goals and these dreams, they seemed out of reach. But if I wasn't going to attack them and put myself in the line, who else would? And so we need to empower others to realize that that's possible. And we also need to inspire them with the story of service and with our stories, because each of us, has an incredible journey to share. So that's kind of, where I was, how I served, and where I am today. And I'm more than happy after this to answer any further questions. But I'm here to tell you that every single one of you is out there and can change somebody else's life by sharing your story. So please open up and share both the good, the bad, and the ugly, because that's what makes us a better team. And that's what makes us unite as a country.
Wow, Caroline, thank you so much for sharing this presentation with us and giving us a little bit about your story of military service and just how you're applying everything you've learned in the military with, I just cannot believe 9 years of training and education is what it takes to create an awesome fighter pilot. That is a significant amount of training and investment that the Navy put into you, but also that you had to overcome and stick with for that long to make that happen. Really, really incredible. So perseverance, absolutely.
Thanks,
Thank you
Lindsay.
for sharing that. I'm really blown away. I'm excited to read your book. Can you tell us when it is available? I believe it's available now, and where people can find it if they're interested to know more.
Correct. So Jet Girl just launched actually 2 weeks ago on the Today Show, Fox and Friends, MSNBC, and now I've been on a national book tour. So it's currently available online at Amazon, at Barnes and Noble, at any of your local bookstores. Some are carrying it, some are not. But I follow me on Jet Girl USA, so on Instagram, or my website is jetgirlusa.com. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. And I'm more than happy to support and answer any of your questions. And if you need support, please feel free to reach out. It might take me a couple days to get to my DMs. My inbox fills up super rapidly these days, but that's what I'm here for, is to support not only, veterans, active duty, but also those women and men who are striving for careers they never thought were possible on the outside. So thank you for asking that, and thank you for allowing me to share, Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. And then, of course, the Helo Dunker. Ooh, that brings back memories of Air Crew School. That was fun. So.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I figured a lot of people have a little bit of, whew, okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, people don't know that. I mean, it's not just one time that you're going in that thing. First, you start out fully, being able to see, and then they turn the lights out and they put the darkened goggles on, and every evolution gets worse and worse and worse, which is just how military training goes. They start you, maybe you put a toe in the water, and next thing they push you in all the way. But that's why we're so resilient as veterans, because we're used to that type of trial by fire training. So that's great.
Yeah, correct. You should see the bankers' eyes. Bankers, it's so interesting. They walk in, Wall Street traders, they think they have the hardest of the hard and Wolf of Wall Street. And you start sharing about the helicopter danker, and their eyes, they swell to like 3 times the size, and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that day in and day out. And you're like, the last time is blindfolded, and they just can't even fathom that we do that. So yeah.
Yeah.
And I imagine infantry and SEER school and all those are much
Yeah.
worse too. So yeah, I'm impressed by all of us.
Yeah. Well, your stories are important, and I know Samantha, one of our next presenters, will share a little bit about what she's doing at Heart and Armor to gather some of these stories as well, because it's how we share stories of military service and help other people understand what it is to serve your country, what the type of training we go through that not only makes us successful and gives civilians a chance to support us and give us a chance as you know, staff, managers, leaders, whatever it is, in our next careers, but also so they understand what our U.S. fighting force really is, so they don't take for granted, you know, what it is to serve in the military, how important it is to support our troops, but also everything that comes with that. So thank you again. And now I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speakers. We have Gerard Chocroon, who is the Executive Director of the Heart and Armor Foundation. And with him also is Samantha Erickson, who is our Veteran and Community Lead for the Heart and Armor Foundation. So welcome, both of you. Thank you for joining us. We'd love to hear more about your organization and what you all are doing to help veterans in California and in the nation.
Great. Thank you so much. And Caroline, if you have not muted yet, I might have a question for you at the very beginning of ours. If you can just hang tight for a second. Some of you said kind of segues nicely.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Thank you. And that was great, by the way. Thank you. Lindsay, I didn't hear Caroline saying next slide. Do I need to control this from my device, or do I just say next slide and you advance it?
Say next slide and I'll advance it.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so the Heart and Armor Foundation is new. We're began in 2019. Our broad aim is to support veterans through scientific research, but also to bring the civilian community into the stories of the veteran community and this kind of sublime and transcendent parts of military service that are lost on the 99% of us who do not serve. We really want to make headway in terms of bringing people who are not in this conversation into this conversation. And a big part of our charge is to bring, kind of well-intentioned Americans who care about, citizenship and about the country, who might not have a tremendous fund of knowledge about the veteran experience, and for us to try to change that and show that, supporting veterans isn't just kind of a nice obligation, but it's really an opportunity for us to learn about, the camaraderie, the citizenship, the difficulties, the beauty of military service, which is something that, we feel kind of in our bones. Is important beyond just those who care about veterans. So the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about a quarter of our portfolio first, or I'm going to, about the women warriors part of our portfolio. And then at the end, quickly talk about the kind of broader conversation. A lot of the work that I'm presenting today, some research of the two leads on our Women Warriors portfolio, Sabra Inslicht and Shira McGinn, both of whom who are PhDs at the University of California, San Francisco, and work in research on women's health in the veteran population. But to just quickly kind of hop onto something that Caroline said, when you were talking about the kind of moral and mental and physical aspects of your military journey, something you said kind of rung a bell that we, I would say, struggle with, but try to keep a balance with. And I wanted to just put it to you, if it's okay, for a quick kind of transition. There are these physical challenges that, throughout the history of the military has been done by men, and now women are filling these roles. Do you feel like other women veterans have a tension between, on the one hand, wanting to not be seen as lesser or not be seen as people who need special kind of considerations or treatment, yet at the same time want to focus on the unique needs of women? So not trying to be apart, but also trying to focus on what is unique about our part of the puzzle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And I can completely agree with that. I think a great way to frame the conversation is, women are amazingly capable, physically, mentally, morally, and they do have that grit to accomplish these combat roles. But there are unique men, or women are not just miniature men, and our bodies physiologically are different. And so there are needs that we should adapt and we need to invest in to make the experience fair, to make it a level playing field. And so, for example, in the fighter jet, going to the bathroom, it's just a
Right.
fact of nature. Our plumbing is different, and it doesn't make us weaker or lesser. We just need an adapted system so that we can effectively urinate in the plane. I hate to say it, but and when that's not possible, it creates long-term kidney damage. It creates skin conditions. It creates a myriad of issues. But it doesn't mean that we're any less good at our job. It just requires a little bit of adapting. And once we make that investment and we say, hey, no, let's do this. I think it's number one, fair. I think the rest of the world understands it, and I don't think we're lessening standards to open up the aperture for more talent to come in the door, because talent today does not look like talent did 25 years ago. As a matter of fact, post-secondary education, it's 55% women graduating from that, and it will soon be 60%. STEM degrees are the same thing, and so we need to capitalize on the talent that's out there and really bring them in the door so that our fighting force can be the strongest it's ever been.
So I so appreciate that. I feel like sometimes I struggle when I'm talking about it from the care community, when we're talking about discrepancies in terms of the resources available to men versus women. We never want to appear to be pitying or appear to be kind of talking down to the female veteran populations, like, oh, you need extra help or something like that. But to us, really, and sort of you can go to the next slide, Lindsay, if you want, what we're really trying to do is try to level the playing field and give have a field of research and a field of clinical care that respects and understands those unique needs of women veterans without having some sort of stigma that women need special treatment. So anyway, I kind of like to begin with just something noting that. And thank you for explaining it so much better than I ever could, Caroline. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Gerard.
So just quickly, Caroline was talking about how being, women in the military is a minority, which is correct. It's also the fastest growing minority. However, it's the largest sort of, and probably most of you know this well, but just coming from the perspective of, the VA and of the research community, that this is not a trivial population and this is not a trivial sized group. We really, to take care of veterans, we have to take care of women veterans. It's not to try to be woke, or it's not to try to, to be, it's really just a charge. We just have to do that. So as you can see here, women veteran population is growing. And then next slide, as the veteran population overall sort of decreases. So and next, you can even go through the next couple slides if you want. The challenge that we face is just how do we, how do we care for a new generation of veterans who just have not had the same kind of challenges. There's just different biology to the men and women, to the people who are doing these tasks, and we need to figure that out, because it's not just, again, important for women. It's important for the veteran community. We have to be able to take care of both. So next slide. What we can see is that these are the top health conditions that are reported by the VA for men and women. So again, coming from the perspective of a system that wants to take care of veterans, if you stratify those two, those are different lists. And you can argue, and I think there's a couple of circles coming up, Lindsay, if you want to tap those. Right, so mental health, you could argue maybe it's underreporting in the male veteran population and so forth. Reproductive health is obviously something that's unique to women veterans in the way that we look at it. But that we're behind on this and we need to catch up. And then next slide, please. And so again, just to sort of say, I don't want to be too doom and gloom in this presentation and say, we don't know how to take care of women. That's not true. Here in San Francisco, we're very sort of fortunate to have, in my opinion anyway, a progressive VA that at least tries very hard to kind of be ahead of the game and to really meet the needs of veterans. But from a research perspective, the body of literature from which we draw these treatments, and that it not just within VA, but all throughout the country, the way that these are doled out to women is there are gaps, and that women veterans get caught in kind of this larger discrepancy in science, in which basically women's health is not as well understood as male health, and there are many reasons for that. Next slide, please. But as somebody who spent a lot of time in my early career trying to get people into research studies, women are fundamentally a little harder to study for the scientific community. It's harder because women have menstrual cycles, and if you're trying to study hormones, so I think we're scooting. Are we? I think this is the no, okay, you're fine. But basically, sorry, slide comment. But basically, because women are harder to study because they have kind of fluctuating hormones throughout the menstrual cycle, typically what happens is something called the assumption of negligible biological difference, where we assume that if we run tests on male mice and male people and male subjects, that we can just extrapolate those findings and bring them on to women. But that is incorrect. And we're not the only ones who note that. That's a sort of largely understood phenomena in the medical community, but women veterans in particular feel the brunt of that because so many of the kind of top medical conditions that women veterans come back with are poorly understood in comparison to their male colleagues. So this is kind of a gap that we're trying to fill. Something like Ambien is a great example. From 1994 to 2014, there was no kind of different recommendations or different studies on what this sleep medication did to the male body and female body. But of course, the hormonal differences between men and women showed that after 20 years of kind of prescribing Ambien to both genders equally or based on height and weight, that women's bodies processed it a lot more slowly and a lot less efficiently than male bodies, which makes kind of sense biologically and hormonally. But it was 20 years of women kind of getting inappropriate medication dosages, and there were car accidents, and there were health problems because of this. So that kind of represents what we're trying to fill that gap. We're trying to bring the understanding of a female veteran up to that of their male colleagues. Julianne, can I do a quick time check? How am I on time?
You're doing fine. We're going to go till about 10:50. Right.
Okay. Samantha and I have 15 more minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I think we'll go more quickly than that. So if you could bump up 2 slides, I believe, to the one that says fear conditioning and fear extinction. Next slide, please. So great. So anyway, how this really poses a problem in the women veteran community, kind of demographically speaking, is a post-traumatic stress disorder, even though a lot of people are tired of hearing about it, and we understand that. It is a huge public health problem for us in the care community, and it's something that gets worse over time. So we really are focusing on trying to find new ways to address, treat, and prevent post-traumatic stress. Now, the kind of core scientific or the terminology for some of the core mechanisms in post-traumatic stress disorder, fear conditioning, which is basically acquiring a fear response to non-threatening stimuli, and fear extinction, which is basically being cured of that, getting rid of that fear reaction, is at the core of post-traumatic stress disorder treatment. Now, next slide, please. Hopefully this comes out. So 98% of all the research on fear conditioning and fear extinction have been done on males or male mice or male subjects and so forth. Even though, like Ambien, this is something that impacts a hormonal system that is completely and totally different in male and females. So now I don't want to be too doom and gloom and say that the treatments that women are getting are inappropriate, or that women veterans should not trust the VA, or that they should not trust their therapists on their post-traumatic stress disorder treatments. That's not true, but it's just that the studies of this core mechanism have been so predominantly focused on males because they're easier to study, that we are not where we should be on understanding females and post-traumatic stress. And because that's it's high on the list of complaints of women veterans, this is something that's really important that we try to repair. So if you could bump ahead a couple of slides to the next one. So right, mental health and reproductive health. So this is our Women Warriors portfolio. So you can bump up too. And so essentially, this is what we are doing. We have scientists at UCSF that we support. Sabra and Shira run a program where we're basically clicking off these studies. And for us, this is the core of our multidisciplinary research center, where we want to take these projects that we can do and that are important. There are other projects and other work out there, but this is what we think are really important. And so we're basically getting private funding to do pilot research in these different projects. These are the first 10. We've actually completed the disordered eating study, and that's now been funded at the VA by I think $1.5 million. We're right now doing an infertility in women warriors study, and then all these others are we have a checklist. And at the end of the day, we think that we can move the needle on the scientific understanding of how combat and how service-related stress impacts the female mind and body, and that we can help close that research gap that was kind of demonstrated earlier. So next slide, please. So when it comes to the kind of conclusions of why we think this is important, which is that we understand that science is not terribly, it's slow, it's kind of moves in aggregate, it's complicated, and it's not always the kind of most sexy or emotionally fulfilling piece of this work, but something that we think is really important, not just to women veterans, but to women in general, is that science is where is like the garden from which we pick to find ingredients to create new treatments and to deliver new services. And for us, having a robust field from which to choose is really important. So in a way, it's an opportunity not just to help women veterans, but to help to forward that and to close that gap in the women's civilian community as well. And again, these are highly applicable things like eating disorders, things like suicide and military sexual trauma and so forth. These are critically important things that we want to make sure are being done with a kind of evidence base to it, not just what do we kind of think. That sort of mentality has not been good for veterans over the years, and that's something that we really applaud the VA in particular on, putting an emphasis on evidence-based treatment. And also, just this is something that again has become a more important. Even if you don't care about women, if you care about veterans, you need to address the female population because it's just growing and growing and growing, and that's an important. It's now an indisputably important demographic. So next slide, please. So I'll go quickly into Heart and Armor a little bit. We started in 2019. Next slide. We're based here in San Francisco. But our impact, hopefully through research and so forth, is global. And we work with the National Center for PTSD some and have some tentacles in Southern California. But really, we want to bring kind of scientific rigor both to our kind of lab science, but also our community programming. So next slide. I won't go through this too in detail, but we've had success before we launched as a foundation. We've been doing these pilots in our different focus areas. We now have 10 scientific publications from this pilot funding. We have used it to get grants of over about $8 million in federal funding to continue on with some of the women work, to do some of the post-traumatic stress work. And what we'd like to do over the next 5 years is to create 2 different research centers here in the Bay Area, really focused on military medicine. We do not have an academic medical center in the United States. It's really focused on kind of lab science and veterans. So that's what we're trying to do. So next slide, please. Just quickly, our 4 focus areas: mental health, particularly post-traumatic stress, women veterans, and trying to fill the gaps I was discussing earlier. Reintegration, which is the Bay Area in particular, trying to overcome some of those barriers that not just prevent veterans from integrating into San Francisco, but prevents San Francisco from reaping the benefits of a healthy present veteran population. So many people are priced out, and how do we help people link in this kind of unique environment? And then that last one, which Samantha can sort of touch on after I'm done, just cultural engagement. How do we bring civilians to this? How do we translate this into such a way so the things Caroline was talking about earlier about sharing stories, the good, the bad, the ugly, about kind of creating this richer and better team that we feel that's not just veterans, that's a civilian community as well. We really want to be a broker of that. So why don't I kind of just skip ahead? I'm going to actually end and let Samantha take over. Maybe the very end, the second to last slide, Lindsay, if that's okay, or I believe slide 30. That's one. Yeah, so this is the kind of the core of our team. It's a combination of some youth groups, some clinicians, researchers, some veterans. Musician John Mayer has been an incredibly generous donor to this and has helped us. It is still helping us kind of come up with new channels of communication through mainstream media and through just kind of using his social media prowess to help us tell those stories. And with that, I will pass over to Samantha.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Gerard. I just want to start by thanking Lindsay, the Calvet Women Veterans, and then also Caroline for sharing your story. The 2 things I'm going to touch on really tie in with Caroline's mission and her story as well. So the four main focus areas for Heart and Armor, I'm going to touch on point 3 and 4. So I'll start with reintegration. Oh, also a little background about myself. I'm an Air Force veteran. I served active duty for 6 years. I'm currently an active reservist. I've been in a total of 11 years to date. So the reintegration portion, there is an organization called the Bay Area Student Veteran Leadership Council that was established through San Francisco VA, Presidio Trust, and the Heart and Armor Foundation. And that is the purpose of the Bay Area Student Veteran Leadership Council is to target Bay Area college campuses and help develop connection and communication between student veteran leaders to help them come up with ideas for mentorship, resources, and help facilitate that transition on college campuses. So my experience, different than Caroline's, coming from an enlisted perspective, veterans go to school immediately after their service. So I find that a very important target area to help our veterans through transition. And through the Bay Area Student Veteran Leadership Council, we're able to target 20 plus colleges and universities in the Bay Area to create that network to help with that transition among the student veteran leaders, and then be able to take that to their student veterans on their college campuses. And then the second part I'm going to touch on is the cultural engagement. So Lindsay mentioned a few times the video project that Heart and Armor has been working on. So initially we were trying to reach out to as many veterans as possible to tell their story about their service, away from the media, not media generated questions or whatever is going to get the rise out of current media today, but really their genuine feelings, their stories, their experiences. And being a female veteran, I really wanted to focus on women's stories because I think that they aren't told as frequently and they're misunderstood. So what we ended up doing is 2 days of filming to tell about 12 different stories of veterans within the Bay Area. And then hopefully we'll be able to make that connection with the civilian population to give them a real idea of our experiences, and then to let fellow veterans know that they're not alone, same as Caroline's mission with her book, to just help with that transition and let student veterans in the community know that they're not alone in their feelings, their thoughts. One of my biggest pieces of advice for newly transitioning veterans is to become part of some sort of veteran organization, even if it's just emails that they receive, but to have that camaraderie and that sense of purpose that Caroline also mentioned earlier, that's really important for veterans. And I don't think they understand that initially. They kind of want to be done with their service, but their service really shaped who they are even when they leave the military. And it's important to tell those stories, to create camaraderie, to get more civilian support and understanding on what we experience. That's all I have.
Thank you so much, Samantha, and thank you to Gerard. Gerard, did you want to add anything?
No, just a thank you to Samantha, and a thank you to you, Lindsay, and to the people who are really kind of carrying the torch on this. As somebody who, I think our aim is to, in a way, pull out the kind of over curated, over like sentimentalized story parts of veterans and over kind of Hollywood piece of it, but try to still use the the tools of communication without kind of the downside, which is that it gets kind of sterilized or it gets kind of dramatized. And what's kind of nice about being put after Caroline's great presentation about what seems like a great book is just that, again, I feel like I just want to reiterate that part of our belief and the belief of our whole team is that these are just really important stories for people to know that America is not always, it doesn't always have a great reflection in the mirror these days when you watch TV or put on CNN right now or whatever. There's some kind of tough reflections of this country, but when you really focus on people who've served and who've done something really hard and who've done something sort of amazing and for whom, for a lot of people it's been really difficult, but a lot of people have got a lot of kind of character and moral, mental, and physical advancement out of it, that these are stories that are really important culturally, not just to veterans, but to civilians and to the larger kind of fabric of the country. And we're really committed to that and committed to not trying to insert our own personal beliefs and narratives on top of it. So for the part of the project that Samantha is kind of commenting on, she was a huge help, and it's hard. It is hard to kind of get real stories out there that are compelling enough to watch, but not not manipulated in some way. So anyway, it's on our website, heartandarmor.org. There's a tab called Veteran Voices. People can follow us on social media, and we're just at the very beginning of it. And we have a lot of high-profile partners who are interested, and certainly in the ethos of it. And we hope that you'll join us and help us, make sure that those stories are diverse and correct and true, and that they don't always have to be the same, but they need to be authentic. And we hope it's a project that we all do. It's not just us doing the work and everyone else watching it. We want to bring as many people into it as we can. That goes with research. We could definitely, if there are people in the Bay Area who would be interested in participating in research, male or female subjects in our Women Warriors Research Center, we need participants. If there are people who want to be involved in sharing stories or telling their own, we're open to that. And so my contact info is on the website, but also you're welcome to pass it around, Lindsay, as much as you want. But we're interested in bringing as many people into the work as want to be involved in it. So I guess that's my sort of closing statement on Heart and Armor in the context of this call. And thank you.
Wonderful. So what I get out of this, Gerard and Samantha, is that through your work and the work of your colleagues at Heart and Armor, you're raising some really important and distinctive points, which is that we have to, in order to serve women veterans better as a nation, as a state, and as a community of service providers, as well as veterans ourselves, we have to overcome some of the kind of inherent and historical pitfalls that are born of biases when it comes to doing good research on women veterans and including them in the overall body of research that's done on veterans in general. And then on top of that, we have to remember that one woman veteran is one woman veteran, and that we are nuanced and different and all have very different experiences, as Caroline points out in her experience in the Navy. And so any assistance and connection to your organization and other veterans organizations that are doing kind of similar work, as well as hearing more about veteran stories of service, in particular women veterans, it's all moving in the right direction, and we need more of it, because we do have to better understand modalities of treatment and any sort of approach from cultural competency and trauma-informed care that we provide to women veterans may need to be a little bit different and distinct from what we provide to men veterans. And that's very important to acknowledge, because what you're saying is our population is increasing year over year. We are becoming a much larger proportion of the veteran population, and all of our services and systems are going to have to account for that and start accommodating what is really not a minority in the veteran community any longer. Exactly. So I really appreciate everything that you guys are working on, and of course appreciate Caroline being open to sharing her story in such a public and I'm sure candid way. So does anyone, for any of our participants on the call today, do you have questions for our presenters at this time, either through our chat window or on the phone? Now would be a great time to ask them. We have about 8 minutes left in the call to be respectful of everyone's time. It looks like we do have one comment from Eric Faulkner. Let's see. Eric says VA's Veteran Experience Office, which is where he is, they work with community veteran engagement boards to share stories via events that we call Vet Talk X which is a TED Talk style event. They're performed prior to events such as vet resource events, on the news, and in personal settings to destigmatize what the civilian community and employers think of our veterans. They're sharing the positive impact veterans have in the community. That's excellent to know too. Eric, it would be great if you could connect with our presenters as well and talk more about the Vet Talk X stories. We'd like to know more about that for sure. And then Terry asks, can you share again where you go about sharing your own stories? Is that through Calvet or the organization? To share your stories that Heart and Armor is collecting, you need to go to heartandarmor.org. And it looks like there's an email on the next slide. Let me push that up too, Carrie. You can email info@heartandarmor.org. Is that the best way to get a hold of you, Samantha, regarding the story sharing?
That email address goes to Gerard. That works just fine. I can put my email address in the chat window for everybody, and then they can also email me directly as well.
Okay, thank you.
The one thing I would chime in and say, I really appreciate, you guys talking about the stories and how you do that. And I think the biggest thing of coming through that I learned in my experience, it took 4.5 years to write the book from inception to getting it out there. And the hardest part for me was sharing that story authentically. I had a civilian co-author, which was actually a great experience because it helped translate a lot of the stories in a way that, the general public can understand. But for so long, I wanted to keep my military experience just this super positive, oh, this, that, and the other thing, because I had erased a lot of the struggle that I had faced. But coming through to civilian employers and the civilian population, we all have to encounter that, or we all have to realize that everyone encounters roadblocks and everyone has to work to overcome things. And we're no different. And when you're able to share that and people can relate to the emotions that you felt and the things that you did, that is what really drives these deeper level connections and what makes people want to invest in you. And so that was something that I learned. And sometimes it does take a lot of strength to put it out there, and then you put it out and some people are going to hate it. Some people love it and some people are going to hate it. And you just have to deal with that because it's life, That's my 2 cents on it.
That's an absolutely great observation, Caroline. It is not easy to share your story, and sometimes you want to maybe sanitize it a bit so that it hits the right audience, or so that it doesn't bring up some of the more negative aspects of what you experienced. But those are important conversations. I mean, after all, I think what Heart and Armor is trying to do somewhat, and what you're showing through sharing your stories of military service, is that you have to share the good with the bad, the negative with the positive, the hard with the easy, because otherwise people don't get, the 99% of the population that doesn't serve doesn't get a true picture of what it is to be a military service member. And it's very easy to lump us all into one category, or even a subcategory of people who've served in the military, and to stereotype that. And that's not doing anybody any good or service. So thank you for explaining that, about how important it is to share that authentically.
Yeah, and I appreciate you putting it in those words. And it's just so important to share, and in job interviews and all that kind of stuff. And it connects with people. So that's what I found. And I'm excited for everyone else to kind of keep doing that, because I know there are other people out there doing it right now, which is cool.
So Gerard, I do have a question for you. You said that you guys are planning to open up some research centers, academic research centers within the Bay Area. Do you have a timeline for when you're looking to open those centers up?
Well, so the offices and centers are functional now. We just want to kind of give them core infrastructure that they can become a Women Veterans Research Center. So it's basically the Department of Psychiatry at UCSF that's located at the San Francisco VA. But the timeline for actually having those in fully operational would be, assuming that our fundraising goes well, would be 2024, as far as completing kind of construction. But research is good, but it's happening now. The research is happening now. It's just we're trying to grow it.
Right. Yeah, you've got some great partners in helping you accomplish that research. So that's really positive to hear.
Yeah, we're very proud of them, and it's kind of interesting because the Bay Area has such a funky kind of veterans climate because there's a lot of history and there's a lot of tech and stuff, but the science piece of it sometimes gets left out. But they're really world-class scientists all through San Francisco who are kind of piecemeal doing this really cool veterans work. There's not like a central hub for them. We'd like to build that, but it's just sort of kind of important to know that a lot of the like national kind of discoveries and progress that happen in veterans health a lot of it are happening in California, and particularly in Northern California. So it's nice to kind of have a little minute to plug that outside of our little, niche.
Absolutely. It characterizes the Bay Area in a unique light. You've got the Presidio, you've got several organizations in that area, and then UCSF and VA San Francisco and NCER all doing this work. I can tell you what I would like to see is some statewide work on women veterans. We haven't been able to see a lot of data or undertake good surveys for some time. And I think it's time to reevaluate and to kind of take measure of our population of women veterans here in the state, particularly because, kind of what Caroline's story displays is that women's roles are changing rapidly in the military since the open of the ban on women in combat, and because so many more women are joining from millennial generations. Things are changing rapidly. So we've got to get a handle on more research of the most current population, as well as continuing to look at our populations of women who've served in years past and decades past to see what progress has been made to give them better resources, or where they're experiencing new health challenges that were not previously researched. So there's a ton of need out there and a ton of work to do. To work together to do it because a lot more.
Well, Lindsay, if you ever need partners in advocating for that, I think you hit the nail on the head, which is it's too hard to find out kind of basic rudimentary data about veterans, in my opinion, but particularly women veterans throughout the state of California. So if you ever need a partner in kind of advocating for whatever needs to be done, we'd be happy to do it. It's not our strength, but we certainly would benefit from what you're talking about.
Wonderful, great. Well, folks, that takes us right to 11 o'clock. I think we have time for one more question or comment if necessary, and then we want to be respectful of everyone's time here and jump off this call. Any more questions from our participants or any last comments from speakers? All right. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining. You can find this webinar recorded at calvet.ca.gov/womenvets. Go to our statewide webinar. You can also connect with Heart and Armor at heartandarmor.org, and you can connect with Caroline and follow her at jetgirlusa.com. Thank you again to our three wonderful presenters. Best of luck to all of you, and we will see you all again in January. We're looking at January 22nd at 10 a.m. for our next call. So happy holidays and happy New Year. And you'll see an email and social media posts about when our next call will be, just to confirm our topic. Thank you again and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having me. See ya.
Thank you.